Hello, welcome to the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. I am your host, Roy Kessel, and we are very excited today to have with us a special guest. We have Nicole Fernandez, and Nicole is the founder and president of the Gametime Foundation based out of Miami. So, Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Finally, to meet you. We've met a few times on social media, so you're my social media friend.
Exactly. Well, I know you're doing some really incredible work down there. So we're going to spend a lot of time diving into that. But before we go into a little bit of your background, tell us the overview about Game Time Foundation.
I guess the overview is I say through my passion, which is sports journalism, I found my purpose in life, which is help children through sports. And that's how I started Game Time Foundation. So I guess it's a way for me to unite both of the love for the game on and off the field.
And so what does, at its simplest version, what does Game Time Foundation do?
Well, what we do is we collect equipment here in Miami, but what I say is much more than taking equipment to children. It's about inspiring children to stay active in the sport they love, just because in many of these countries that we help out, the equipment is very expensive and, it's just, I guess, supporting them through their sport that they love.
Well, sports has such a big power, right? We know that,
Mhm.
and it's really um, important when we look at, as you said, how do we inspire kids through
Mhm.
sports? So, what I want to do is back up to when Nicole was a young girl and find out what inspired you in sports. How did you get started and develop that passion?
Well, I guess I could say when I was about 14, 15 years old, my dad took my sister and I to our first baseball game. Back then, it used to be Florida Marlins. And I guess for me, it's a way of merging both of my cultures. My sister and I we were born here in the United States, but our family is Colombian. So I guess I saw sports as the way that it unites people, no matter where you come from, what language you speak. And I guess for me, baseball has always been like America's pastime. So it was a way to join both of my cultures, and that's how I got interested in sports. And then even more when I went to college, studying journalism. Everyone wanted to do news, but I'm like, I want to do sports. So yeah.
So, where did you go to college?
I went here locally in Miami to Florida International University. So
Okay,
stayed local.
FIU, and
Yep.
you did journalism and wanted to focus on sports. Um,
Correct.
so you would think that that would be a really popular area and hard to get
Mm.
into because there's so many people that want to break into sports journalism. So tell us
Mhm.
about that journey of breaking that barrier.
I'm still trying to break the barrier. It's been a couple of years since I graduated college, but it's true what they say. Experience is more than knowledge. It's not what you know, is who you know as well. So it's been hard to get into sports journalism, but I love it. And I really, now I've also learned about social media, and my heart has always been baseball. I'm currently working in baseball as a social media coordinator. That's one thing I learned too. If you like sports, and make sure if you want to do football, or if you want to do baseball, if you want to do soccer, try to, focus on which sport you want to do. And I think that helps you along your career path.
So social media has such a intense power now
Yeah.
when you look around at all of the different platforms between Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Um, you know, talk a little bit about what you've seen from your experience in that position on what you find is one of the best ways to engage an audience.
I love social media. I think it has a lot of powerful outcomes, but again, it has to be used correctly, right? For Game Time Foundation, I think being a reporter helped me build the foundation to help me talk about Game Time. So I started the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I do pictures and video, and it's a way, at least through Game Time Foundation, to people to see the work that we're doing. I've learned in philanthropy, people want to see when they're helping out, whether it's money or equipment, where the help is going to. And it's nice, also with the kids when I meet them, and most of them have never seen an iPhone, and when I do take a selfie with them, they're excited because they've never seen an iPhone. They've never taken a selfie, so I guess it's a way to bond. But again, it's also how you use social media. And I think in sports, it has an immense impact. It's different than watching a soccer game or a baseball game live. Then you can go back to social media and actually watch back that home run or that goal or whatnot.
Yeah, and it's so interesting now when, it used to be that you had sports talk shows where people would call in
Mhm,
and talk about what's going on
mhm,
and bicker or complain.
mhm.
Now almost all of that is done on
Oh,
social
yeah.
media, right? Usually for that type of thing, Twitter becomes one of the
Mhm,
more active channels because it's so immediate, right? You can be sitting there watching a game with three of your friends and you can be talking to another 10 of your friends somewhere else and everybody can chime in, as they're able to. But that also comes along with a danger,
mhm,
right? As you said, you talked about using social media correctly. And I think one of the important lessons for people that are getting into this space is, you know, what kinds of things have you seen that really are not good, right? Are not being done
mhm.
correctly, just from your experience that you've learned over that time?
I think, like you mentioned, I think now people, it's important that we each have an opinion and we're able to share it. But I think some people maybe overstep their opinion. So it's tricky. Social media is tricky. It's interesting now that you mentioned TikTok too. I mean, I am 33 years old, and when I graduated college, it was still around YouTube, Facebook was starting, Twitter. But now, like the next generation is all about TikTok. Like I even have to learn about TikTok because I'm like, I'm young, but these young generation has gone through another level with social media with TikTok. So it's interesting to see, I guess, by generation how social media impacts. And for example, my dad loves Twitter because he's always watching the news or what sports team did what. So it's interesting how I guess each generation uses social media, right? Whether you follow an athlete, whether you follow a soccer team, baseball team, basketball team, it's how you get your news.
Well, how you get your news changes, right? The number of printed newspapers has certainly
Mhm,
gone down dramatically um, over time. People are getting stories and they're getting them quick. You think
mhm,
back in the day when the papers were in their heyday. We used to have to wait.
yeah.
I'm 57. We used to have to wait till the next day to get the newspaper
Yeah.
to get all of the scores. You could barely even find the scores, unless you were sitting in front of your TV for the 10 o'clock news. To get all the Sunday scores was hard. And, then when you had a night game, that usually didn't even make the paper. So you didn't even get this stats from the night game until the following day. And it's now, people are like, this stupid site isn't updated. That play happened 7 seconds ago, and my GameCast, isn't
Mhm,
isn't showing me the live score. And it's funny when you watch some of the events on Twitter and see how immediate it is, right? And in some
mhm.
events, when you look at the cable broadcasts, right, with the slight delay or things like
Yeah,
you're reading the result of a play on Twitter before you're seeing it on your TV,
true.
even when you think you're watching it live.
It's true. Like you mentioned, I think it's the urgency. People have gotten used to everything happening now and then following up right now, which is okay. But for someone who works in social media, I see the other side, and like you mentioned about newspaper, maybe because I'm a journalist and I wish we still have that. Like it would be nice to get newspaper and read it in the morning.
Right.
You're always on constantly on your phone. Like I like to read books. I like to feel the pages and turn the pages. It's not the same being on Kindle. I mean,
Well,
my opinion.
reading long form and books is almost a lost art, right? If you look at,
Yes.
at what people do. But we can feel the passion you have for sports, right? You talked about
Yeah.
it, even though in a sense you got a late start comparatively in sports. You talked about going to a game when you were 14 or 15
Yeah.
years old, right? For many people, it starts when they're somewhere between 4 and 6 or 7 years old, and they
Mhm.
they. So you really jumped into it fast. Um,
Yes. Although my dad has always loved soccer, so I guess since we were little, I would watch my dad watching soccer, so, it caught my attention, but actually going to the game, I was a bit older, and I quickly fell in love with the game of baseball.
Well, what did you love about baseball? What drew you to baseball?
Like I mentioned before, for me, it was like a way to combine both of my American and like Latin cultures. Like it is America's pastime, and I don't know, I just liked it. A lot of people say you have to have a lot of patience for it, and which you do, but I don't know, I found it always interesting. I've tried going to football games. You have fun. I also like soccer. It's very interesting and very fast paced, but I guess baseball, I don't have an exact answer. I just like I like going to baseball games. I'll even go by myself, and I just enjoy the game.
Well, it's one of the great things about baseball is there is no clock. There's no fixed
Yeah.
time, right? You have that little timeless element, and you get things like a full count where somebody fouls off a pitch, and that tension builds
Mhm.
as it goes, and it's not like, oh, the clock ran out, it's
Yeah.
over. It just keeps growing and building, and it's got so many elements. But you talked about it
Mhm.
well. I think you talked about the fact that people are impatient and there's a sense of urgency. And it's like, all right, you had the ball in your glove at the mound 5 seconds ago. You better be throwing the next pitch, right? And they put the pitch clock on, and they're trying to make the game go faster for, we'll say, for the younger generation. And
Mhm.
um, baseball has such a history of that storytelling,
Mhm.
right? Both in print and through radio.
Yeah.
Some of the elite broadcasters really came from baseball because there's so much time to fill up. And you look at somebody, like Jack Buck or like Harry Carey
Mhm.
or like Bob Euchre, and look at the amazing way that they crafted the stories to talk about what was going on. And you're in journalism. Um,
Mhm.
did you get a chance after you took a liking to baseball? Did you follow it more on radio or more on TV?
I guess more on TV, not radio, but I think it's interesting also how you mentioned radio and my grandma would say back in the day you used to watch it in black and white. So I don't know, it's just from TV in black and white to now getting your news on Twitter. It's very interesting how everything's evolved and you know,
It evolves quickly, right?
yes,
And we've seen TikTok explode in the last few
yeah.
years. I had people telling me a few years ago, stay away from TikTok. It's just for teenage girls, and you're going to look, silly trying to use TikTok for Sports Philanthropy Network. And again, now 2 years later, we see a huge explosion in a lot of
Mhm.
the athletes in high school and college using TikTok in very
Yeah.
creative and productive ways. So I want to jump ahead now. You've gone through, you talked about your background in
Mhm.
journalism. Where did you get the idea for starting Game Time Foundation?
Well, when I graduated college back in 2011, I want to say. One of the professors, the last course was to create your own YouTube channel, right? Because back in the day, that would be like your reel. So I decided to create the YouTube channel, and then I would just upload stories that they always say if you want a story that you want to be told or want to hear about. So that's when I decided to go to Colombia. That's where my family is from, and I did a story on American football being played in one of the cities, and another one on a Yankee scout. So it was through that one from a Yankee scout. He's also a scout, but he also would teach little kids how to play baseball. And that's when I say, whether you want to call it the universe, God, I think a lot of people want to find their passion or their purpose, but a lot of times they don't listen, right? So this little kid, they were just happy to be with the coach and learning baseball. And one little kid just told me he loved baseball and he loved his coach. And for me, it impacted because a 5, 6 year old saying he loves someone because he taught him something and why he loves the sport. And it was in that moment I was like, there must be more kids like him who want to play baseball and it's expensive, right? So I came back home to Miami and I just kept thinking of that little kid and I put on Google how to help people and it came out start your own nonprofit and that's where I just started. I put my career on hold to be my mind was to be on ESPN or to be in another sports channel as a journalist, but like I mentioned, my passion led me to my purpose, and it's been it's been quite a ride this past 8.5 years, but I wouldn't change anything for one bit.
So starting an organization is hard.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, yes.
and so you talk about 8.5 years ago. So you started that in about 2014.
Correct.
Um, and what did you find was the hardest part to get off the ground? Because we see people start foundations with so many different backgrounds, so many different skill sets, experience, and nobody has the exact same experience in
Mhm.
starting their organization. So what did that look like for you? What did you find was the big challenge to get it off the ground?
Well, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. There's a lot of documents to be filled out. I have to incorporate it into the state of Florida, the IRS, the 501(c)(3). It was a lot of steps, so it was overwhelming. I did reach out to different people who had nonprofits locally and to see if they could, I would invite them to coffee and they would give me, what to do, what not to do, give me some advice, right? But I think the hardest thing, and it's still the hardest thing, is I quickly learned that the nonprofit world, you need money, right? And no one likes to ask for money, and it's hard to ask for money for others. So I'm still learning from it. I'm a small organization. It's mostly myself who does everything. I do have help from family and friends and strangers, but it's hard when there's big organizations out there and they get a lot of support, they get a lot of help, and I'm just like, why can I be like this organization? How come they get so much money and barely get $20 from whenever I do a fundraiser? So it's been a learning process, but
And it is hard. And I think you see universally across the space is how do you build an organization that is self-sustaining, right? And has
mhm,
a model where you can continue to get the funds that you need to operate so that
mhm,
you don't have to keep going back to the same people over and over and
mhm,
over to do things. So
right,
you talk a little bit about the vision of what you have for game time. So you get game time set up, you've gone through the call it the administrative process of getting things
mhm.
off the ground. Um, what do you feel is the area now where you're able to implement your vision? Talk about what your vision looked like for the organization.
When I started Game Time Foundation, I knew the main focus was to help children through baseball, right? Then I quickly added softball for girls. Then I added soccer because I learned maybe in some places of Colombia, they don't know about baseball, but they do know about soccer and they need the help. So that's when I added soccer as well. Then I've only helped a couple of basketball teams, not so much, just because it's been hard to work with other sports. But right now we work with three sports. I started this to help others, right? And I think along the way, when you're on the path to help others, if there's things that need to be done, it kind of aligns and helps you, right? So during the pandemic, it was really hard because what we do is that I collect the equipment in Miami, Florida, and I take it to kids in Colombia, but I personally take them. During the pandemic, I couldn't travel, but kids still needed help. And I started to make alliances with foundations in Colombia in order for me to, it was a way of maybe like a triangle of us helping others, right? So that's something that I learned to make alliances with other nonprofits or other people who are helping others. In that way, the help can get there even if I can't personally go. I also added another country, which was Puerto Rico. And then this year, I added Honduras. So when I started this, I started to help my parents' country, which was Colombia, but it quickly has gone to other countries, which is something. It's funny. The other day, I was thinking about it. I was like, wow, I wanted Game Time to be bigger internationally, right? And I didn't have it planned for it to be these last 2 years, and it just happened. So, like I mentioned, I think if you're on the path and looking at different ways to help, if you can go one way, help the other way. And now I could say we are in three countries. So I guess I see Game Time helping maybe more countries, more kids, because sports is the way to impact them and help them out in different ways.
This is Roy Kessel on the Sports Philanthropy podcast. We're sitting down today with Nicole Fernandez from Game Time Foundation. And you can see their information here on the screen, gametimefoundation.org, or you can email gametimefound@gmail.com, and Nicole will get right back with you. Well, in addition to dollars, right, or money, we know that that's always one of the big things that people need. Talk a little bit about other ways that people might be able to help Game Time Foundation.
Well, the main way is people donate equipment, right? Right now, I have a storage full of baseball equipment, soccer equipment. The money's not only used to maintain it here, I have to pay a storage monthly, I have to pay different things, but the money mostly goes in order for me to send things over, right? Like logistically. So I understand. I mentioned I don't like to ask for money, but it's something that we do need. But if you can't, I think following on social media, telling a friend, I think it's important to help others in that way, referring each other. And if you're in Miami too, I also collect the equipment, soccer, baseball, softball. Believe it or not, baseballs is something that I need. People like to give me uniforms, bats, gloves, but baseballs are expensive, and I actually need them because a lot of these kids, if you see their baseball, it's not even like a baseball. It's really in that.
Unraveling and falling apart, right, from
Correct.
the types of fields. So,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that collection process. What does that look like in terms of how you collect the equipment and how you organize a drive to collect equipment?
So usually, I guess I'm already known here in Miami, Florida, and I have like different coaches, or I have a batting cage, and they'll just send me a text. Hey, Nicole, we have 3 bags for you. So I usually go, then I take it to the storage. I like to see how everything is. Some things are a little bit too beat up, so I just either throw them away, or if they're in okay shape or I can't use them, give them to Goodwill or like that. Then separate them by sport, by sizes, and then whenever a team reaches out in need of help, whether it's Colombia, Puerto Rico, or Honduras, what I have like an application, right? So I like to make sure the process of the team, how established they are, how many kids they have, what are their sizes, and then from there is when I start building up the process of the donation boxes, and then taking them to the different places so they can be sent to their respective teams and countries.
That's a lot of work. You talk about
Yeah,
storing and sorting all of that equipment, and even though you're not really grading it per se, you're just trying to see if it's in good enough condition to donate and
correct.
make useful, because there is a significant expense in sending the equipment
Mhm.
overseas. Do you take any of it with you personally when you go?
No, well, that's one of the learning process, I guess, part of this. I quickly learned that it's better to ship everything in advance. So it's a lot of work, meaning logistically, like on my days off or the morning before I have my shift start. I usually go to the storage, and for example, like I mentioned, each team will send me a list. So I'll be like, okay, team A has 80 kids, team B has 20 kids, team C has 100 kids. And then that's how I divide the boxes. And then I ship them out by 2, by 3, by 4. I quickly learned not to send 20 boxes at once, depending where it's going, right? And um, hopefully I get to go. And then once that's received in a month or two, I travel and I take things personally. But it's been interesting learning about logistics internationally.
And one of the nightmare stories that we've heard on multiple occasions is people that are doing the type of work that you do and getting equipment to other countries, and then that equipment, let's say, disappears,
Hmm,
right, or is held hostage, so to speak, and
correct.
somebody then says, no, now we need more money to release this
Hmm.
equipment to the kids, or to, we're going to take it and essentially steal it, right,
Hmm.
for our team instead of the team that Nicole shipped it to. Have you had that experience in
Oh,
any of
yes.
those countries?
Unfortunately, in Colombia, well, I say unfortunately, but fortunately, because again, it's all about learning. I think this was in 20, I don't know exactly what day. I know it was about 6, 7 years ago, right? And that's when he shipped about 20 boxes, mostly of baseball equipment. And I sent them on a Monday, and I traveled on Friday to Colombia that were supposed to be there already. Monday passed, Tuesday passed. Where are the boxes? I quickly get a call. They're like, oh, they're here. You have to come to the airport. And all 20 boxes were there. And they wanted a lot of money for it. And I was like, I can't. This is going to different parts of the country. This is for a foundation. I do not have the money. I was there for about 2 hours. And ironically, how again the universe works. About a month before that, I actually won an award from the Colombian Embassy in Washington, D.C. For my work being done in Colombia. And I was like, this guy wants money. They were part of like, they were police officers. I took out my award. I'm like, do you think the Colombian Embassy in Washington, D.C. will give this to just anyone? Like, this is legit work. If you want, I can send you pictures and video. And after 2.5 hours, they gave me the boxes of pleading, of crying, of, and then they were like, we want this money. I'm like, you know what? Then keep it. I don't have that money. So they gave it to me, and I quickly learned not to send 20 boxes at once, by four, by threes. I have friends, family that I send different boxes to. It's a process now, I tell you.
Well, it's incredible work that you're doing, Nicole. I really want to congratulate you for getting all of that off the ground. I know it's a very hard process, and getting that equipment, not only the process of collecting it and storing it and
Mhm.
boxing it up, that's the manual labor side of pulling
Okay.
everything together, but being able to piece together the strategy and the systems that you need so that the equipment actually gets in the hands of
Mhm,
kids instead of being taken,
mhm,
or stolen and resold, or
mhm.
something of that nature.
Which
So
it has happened, like, quickly. I've learned too that even though you have a good heart and you wanna help others, I've quickly learned too that sometimes when you give a helping hand, people wanna take your arm, right? And it's only gonna happen maybe twice or 3 times in these past couple of years, but I've been told that if I've gone to a certain club and X person decided to sell the equipment, and I just get very furious and mad because I'm like, for people, it's just a box of equipment, but for me, it's I have to battle to get these equipment and then to get the money to ship the stuff. So I know it's part of this, and I know even though you're helping out, there's people who have different intentions, but I always think of for the kids, right? This is for the kids, and yeah.
well, I mean, you've poured your heart and soul into getting it
Yeah.
there, and so to have somebody
Mhm,
take that, that's a lot of time and effort that you've put in. That's a
mhm.
lot of people that have helped you gather and collect that equipment, and make arrangements for transportation to get it there. So it's a lot of work down the drain when somebody
Yeah.
does that. So again, I congratulate you on what you've accomplished, and we appreciate you coming on the show with us today.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for what you do too. You give us nonprofits a voice.
Well, that's an important element of what we try to do, so more people can learn about the incredible work you're doing, and see who else we can connect you with in South Florida that can help bolster those equipment drives, and collect more. Before we let you go, I do want to put you on the spot for a minute here, um, and I want to ask you a question. If we could name you, use our sports philanthropy superpowers, and we can name you as commissioner of
Mm.
any sport, what sport would you choose?
Well, the World Cup is coming up, so maybe something soccer related. That'll be good
Okay,
to do.
so now you see the World Cup coming up in Qatar, and a lot of things happening there. What's one change you would like to see in soccer, either on the field or soccer policy?
I think it will be to give more women opportunity to play, right? Our girls need to be have the same access to play the sport across the world. So I think we need to support more women and young girls to play this sport, and for they can also be part of this, part of the World Cup in a different way.
So when you look at that and you talk about access to soccer across the world,
Mhm.
talk a little bit about in the countries that you work with, what you've seen
Oh,
in terms of girls being able to play soccer, which is what you just spoke about, but also softball, and what
mhm.
you've seen in terms of opportunities for girls in Colombia and Puerto Rico.
Well, I say it's tough to see because when you visit these countries, I kind of see a step back or maybe even two steps back for women to be in sports, right? When I was in Honduras in March, I helped just an all-girl soccer team, and I was just talking to them, and they were just happy for the support and the help. I took them uniforms and different things the team needed, like soccer balls and um, cones so they could practice and do drills. And all of them told me that, in their neighborhood, they were looked bad upon because they were playing soccer. And I'm like, I can't believe it's 2022. And in many places of this world, um, when girls want to play a sport, they're still looked bad upon because a girl shouldn't play a sport. So that impacted me a lot because I'm like 2022 and these girls are fighting with everything they have just to play soccer. So I think we still have a lot of work to do. And like I said, sports impacts children in many ways. And I believe children are the future of this world. So if we can support them in sports, it helps them build character and be better citizens of the world.
Well, you're doing a great job, and you're setting that tone, and you may not see it yet, and you may not ever really fully realize that impact that you're having on these young girls, that you're giving them that opportunity. But if you come back and look 20 years from
Mhm.
now, 30 years from now, you're going to see how many of those girls really had a life-changing experience by you giving them that opportunity. So thank you so much for the great work that you're doing, Nicole.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And to all of our viewers and listeners, we appreciate you taking time to join us on the Sports Philanthropy podcast. This is your host, Roy Kessel, signing off. Please remember to live generously. Thank you.